Well, in fact, images now coming in of Prime Minister Modi landing in Moscow. Significant move made by Russia too, with a senior leader now being sent to receive the Prime Minister. In fact, it was the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Denis Manturov, who received the Prime Minister. Interestingly, Manturov is the same person who had received the Chinese president during his visit to Russia. In fact, this is a rare gesture that the first Deputy Prime Minister Manturov will be accompanying the Prime Minister to the hotel from the airport in the same very car. Now, this is once again a reflection of how even Russia attaches importance to the relationship, keeping in mind that this comes at a time when Russia has largely been seen as a global pariah, and bringing India on their side happens to be one of their big tasks that has been cut out, keeping in mind that what we have seen over the last few weeks, particularly with Moscow and Beijing having their talks, and there were certain concerns that many had here in India, is that if at all Moscow and Beijing are inching closer, what does it really mean in terms of the relationship between India and Russia, a relationship that has been nurtured over 7 decades. But keeping in mind that Russia too essentially sees India playing a pivotal role as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, many are also hoping that on the table, on the cards perhaps would also be India's role as a mediator, because that's a crucial aspect that one would be looking at. Keeping in mind that Global South has paid a hefty price because of the Russia-Ukraine war. So which way is it headed, and what role could India really play? What's important to point out here is the fact that the Prime Minister has chosen Russia as the first country that he visits after being sworn in. Remember, the previous visit that he has had was part of a multilateral meeting that took place in Italy. This happens to be the first bilateral that the Prime Minister is going to have in his third term. In fact, after Rajiv Gandhi, Prime Minister Modi is the only Prime Minister to have gone to Moscow immediately after being sworn in. This is also breaking the tradition that most Indian Prime Ministers have had in the past of choosing particularly the neighboring countries. Bhutan, Maldives were one of the countries that the Prime Minister had chosen in his previous term, but this time it was Russia. Listen into what's really happening on the ground, as there's a lot of celebrations taking place within the Indian diaspora that they are looking forward to the visit of the Prime Minister. Well, in fact, both the leaders have met 16 times. India and Russia have had multiple summits, in fact, 21 summits that have taken place so far. The last visit that the Prime Minister has had was back in 2019. This was just before the Ukraine war began. In fact, the meeting was with regards to the economic cooperation between both the nations in Vladivostok, also largely trying to deepen the energy ties that both the nations have. Remember, India has also faced a lot of flack from the Western nations for buying oil from Russia. But having said that, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has essentially spoken about the fact that India will certainly look out for themselves. It's in India's national interest. This is something that somewhere down the line, the West too have had to perhaps come to terms with the fact that India is not going to cow down under the pressure being built by the Western nations, particularly after several sanctions were imposed against Russia by the Western nations. Having said that, India has also played a constructive role, particularly with statements that have been made by the Prime Minister with regards to Ukraine war. Going back to the SCO summit, when the Prime Minister had spoken about the fact that this is not an era of war. And this was also taken up later during the G20 joint communique, which made a reference to that in Bali. Now, these are some of the things that are certainly expected to figure in the bilateral talk that's going to take place. Top of the chart would certainly be with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war and whether at all India plays a pivotal role in trying to diffuse the situation. And thereafter also looking at various other aspects, particularly with regards to trade. Remember, India's import from Russia, which hovers roughly around $61 billion, has tilted that balance of trade. That also is expected to figure in the talk that's going to take place with President Putin. Before we delve into further details of what's going to be on the agenda of Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, let's get you a glimpse of what's really happening on the ground. We'll also try and connect with Sucharita, who's joining us on this broadcast. Sucharita, thank you for joining us on this broadcast. Prime Minister Modi has landed in Moscow.